Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Simon, and first things first, I got a new camera angle. I've been feeling for a while like I need to kind of do a new setup for these reviews, and it's definitely nice to be on the couch now instead of in a chair. Now, I'm not saying that this will necessarily be the camera angle for the foreseeable future. I'm still figuring that out, but I'm going to try this out. We'll see how it goes. I already feel more comfortable again on the couch instead of in a chair. But yeah, the next thing I want to mention before I get into the reviews is if my voice sounds a little bit off, if my words are not being pronounced super clearly, I have really, really bad seasonal allergies right now, so it's hard for me to really talk as well as I would normally like to. You can probably hear it in my voice right now. But, I wanted to film this video anyway. It did make the reviewing process for this really difficult, and I wasn't able to spend as much time on it. Yeah, that's how bad my allergies have been lately. It happens every year. I'm used to it at this point. But I still wanted to get this video out, and I was hoping to review a few more albums than I did in this video, but I'm also going to be going away soon, and yeah, I've just got a bunch of stuff going on. Like I've been saying for a while recently, I have not had the time to upload as many of these album reviews as I would like to, but it is what it is. This is going to be a very, very short video. I mean, this intro actually is quite long, it seems like, so maybe it's not going to be as short a video, but in terms of the reviews itself, it's going to be quite short. But there's no point in wasting any more time right now. As always, these are just my own personal opinions on these albums, so feel free to disagree with me. And yeah, with all that being said, let's get the reviews started. We got 5 albums to talk about today, and I'm starting with... I remember being really impressed by the genre blending on Genesis Owusu's debut 5 years ago. The legitimately great album Smiling with No Teeth. And honestly, I think it's held up pretty well over time. And while 2023's Struggler was a slight step down, it still had a couple moments that really stood out to me and was a pretty solid album overall. So now he's back with album number 3, and there's a lot to like here as well. Genesis Owusu has always had a really thoughtful writing style with a lot of clever lines and smart framing to really get his messages across in a sharp, powerful way, and the songs have usually been very well crafted to really give the words more impact in the ways that I think they're intended. And on this album, he's talking a lot about the current state of the world and how divided we are, mentioning lots of terrible stuff going on and calling for change, but also recognizing that in order to find change that helps everyone, we have to come together and find things in common with each other, because we're all on the same team and we need to act like it, no matter how much we disagree with each other. Although I don't think he's really including the super rich, powerful, greedy politicians and billionaires as part of our team. To quote this album, they up in the yacht, but we in the same boat. No, and not only do I agree with most of what he's saying on this album, but there's a lot of clever lines and poetry as well. And it's a shame that the music itself isn't better. Don't get me wrong, this has got its moments. I really like the funkiness of HELLSTAR, Stampede goes hard as fuck, Death Called Zombie is a great post-punk song, and I actually quite like the emotional music and pitch-shifted vocals of For Life, a song about a friendship breakup. But it's not as musically diverse as I know his albums can be. There aren't really a ton of strong melodies, and the production does have some rough edges that does hold this back more than it probably should. But sometimes I just gotta acknowledge my nitpicks in order to really make the most honest review that I can. So unfortunately, I don't think this is his best album. Honestly, might even be his weakest to date. But it does feature some of his best lyrics, which is why I'll give this a 7 out of 10. I just wish I liked the music itself more, that's all. This is Violet Grohl's debut album, and I just found out recently that this album was coming out, and I was kinda curious. If you're wondering why the name might sound familiar, she's the daughter of Dave Grohl, whom you probably know as the lead singer of the Foo Fighters and the former drummer of Nirvana. And, well, this album is better than the one that her dad's band put out this year, but that's not really saying much. And honestly, while I can praise Violet's vocals, which are really good and fit in this style quite well, and there are some strong melodies, the production often just sounds a bit too rough for my liking, outside of the occasional moment like 595 where it sounds a lot punchier, or Mobile Star, which has a completely different vibe and I really like the moodiness of it. And it doesn't help that there's just not a whole lot that makes this album stand out, as it often just ends up sounding generic. Honestly, it just kind of sounds like there's a lot of Foo Fighters influence on here, which obviously makes sense, but considering that I have not really been a huge fan of a lot of the Foo Fighters stuff that I've heard, it also makes sense that I think this album is really only decent and not much more. And I can't really say that the lyrics are doing that much for me either. I'm not saying it's bad, and lyrics are always open to interpretation, but it feels like it's more based on imagery and attempts at lyrical grandeur than actually really being all that thought-provoking. As usual, it could just be me totally missing something, but it often seems like the messages and themes of these songs are pretty simple, just disguised in more polished writing, which I just personally don't find particularly interesting. But at the same time, it does show that she's putting her creative mind to use on this album, so all of this leads me to give this album a 6 out of 10. I do see some potential here. I just wish it could really have turned into more on this album. I'm curious to hear whatever she does next, but this one is just not really doing much for me. This is the third official studio album from Kim Petras, and I decided I may as well check out her first two albums in preparation for this one, both released in 2023, and unfortunately I wasn't really a big fan of either. Her debut sounded quite reminiscent of Carly Rae Jepsen, albeit more overtly sexual, and unfortunately without the musical magic that sparks Carly Rae Jepsen's music. And then her second album reminded me more of Charli XCX, and not really the Charli XCX music that I like. That being said, I saw the reception to this new album seemed to be way more positive than either of those albums, which was reason for optimism, and I was intrigued. And yeah, this is considerably better. For one, it doesn't feel like it owes as much to its influences, and look, it's not like I have a problem with artists taking influence from one another. I mean, without it, music would not have gotten anywhere. But it feels like at least the attempt at being unique and cool and creative is here on this album, and I think to some extent it's pulled off quite well on a really good experimental pop album. And I've also got to highlight that this album is a lot more melodic, or at least it feels like it is. I guess the melodies are just better, but I think it might actually be more melodic overall. I'm not really sure. But it can lead to some really good hooks on songs like Need for Speed and Korea. All this being said though, I don't think the album's super consistent, and sometimes the experimental production takes away from the sugary pop tunes in ways that I'm not always a huge fan of, and I still feel like there's significant room for improvement here and Kim Petras fully finding her sound, even though I do like a lot of the variety on here. I mean, a song like 101 comes out of nowhere and goes hard as fuck, despite being quite a contrast from the more melodic, slightly more standard pop songs before it on this album. And even though I like the example that I just gave, I don't always think the repetition benefits the songs here. I guess it kind of depends. Regardless, I think there's a lot to like on this album, and I would definitely recommend it to fans of hyperpop-influenced experimental pop, or artists like Charli XCX, Underscores, or 100 Gex. And while I do have some complaints about this album, and I wish it were more consistent, I'll still give it a fairly strong 7 out of 10, and I think it's easily Kim Petras' best studio album thus far. I understand the hype, I'm not sure it fully lives up to it, but it's damn close. It's hard for me to believe that it's been over a year and a half since Devin Townsend released his 2024 album Power Nerd. It still kind of feels like just yesterday that I reviewed it. And I guess that means we're nearing 2 years of this YouTube channel. Yikes, that is crazy. Time is flying by so quickly. Anyway, I decided to revisit that album in preparation for this review, even though I did not really think it was very good at the time, and I stand by that, even though I think it is kind of hilarious how it goes from a consistent style of metalcore slash alt metal slash gent or something like that, and then suddenly shifts genres multiple times within the last song on the album, which might actually be one of those cases of a song that's pretty much so bad it's almost kind of good. I don't know, either way, the album is mediocre, and I almost considered skipping over this new one, but I've only ever listened to that one album of his, and I've heard apparently he's quite good, so I gave a couple listens to this hour-plus magnum opus of orchestral metal, according to the Apple Music description, and just as I expected, I would not call this a magnum opus. Honestly, the running time does not feel justified, and most of these tracks are pretty bland and uninteresting in my opinion. And it feels like it's trying way too hard to be dramatic and compelling on sound alone, rather than actually having a lot of substance. Think Epica at their worst, but with weaker production and even less thoughtful writing. And now here's where I should acknowledge that this is apparently a very personal album for Devin, and if this is an important album to him, then I can absolutely respect that. I mean, of course, like pretty much any popular album, it's gonna have its audience, and I'm not upset about that. I just really wish I liked it more. Now, Devin Townsend has said that this album's main theme is self acceptance, and he uses the metaphor of a moth, probably to symbolize someone becoming their full potential. And honestly, I don't really find it all that compelling. There might be more that I'm missing here, but it just kind of feels like it runs in circles over and over again and doesn't really have a lot of depth. And with 24 tracks, most of which just feel overblown musically, like they're supposed to sound larger than life but don't have the production to support it, nor are the melodies usually particularly interesting outside of the occasional moment. Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one to sit through. I'll give it a 4 out of 10, but keep in mind that's a very strong 4 because I don't think this is anywhere near awful. It's just really overly long and doesn't really offer a whole lot, at least to me. This is the 5th studio album by Bleachers. So in preparation for this, I decided to go through all their other albums, and I think I've determined my favorite of those 4 albums is probably Strange Desire, with the 3 albums following all being pretty underwhelming, with the exception of some individual songs, which I really think is this band's strong suit, and even that debut album wasn't quite great as a whole. Although the 2024 self-titled album really did not have that much going for it at all, and I think it's probably the worst of those 4 albums. So I was hoping that this would be at least a bit of a bounce back, and I guess it is, but not as much as I was hoping. Although I should not really be surprised. Again, I'm not really a huge Bleachers fan in general, so even if this might be one of their better albums, and they have a pretty high floor, they also have a pretty low ceiling. And look, there are some moments here that I mostly like, such as Dirty Wedding Dress, which has some fun storytelling and a carefree attitude about choosing his social circle, and also another Take the Sadness Out of Saturday Night reference. And the most emotional moment on this album is probably I Can't Believe You're Gone, which is likely about Jack's late sister who tragically passed away at age 14, and is probably one of the best songs on this album. Although I do think my personal favorite is Dancing, which has a very different vibe from a lot of the other tracks here, and I really like the line, "Dying is not romantic this young." But with all the weird vocal effects across a lot of this album, and the lack of strong hooks that can really pop off, and some of the messy production here and there, well, it's a 6 out of 10 for me, which is probably the same rating I'd give the 3 previous Bleachers albums, with Strange Desire probably being a light 7. I guess I should just stop expecting greatness from full Bleachers albums, even if they've got some songs here and there that are legitimately awesome. Although I'm not really sure I'll be going back to any of these tracks much, outside of maybe Dancing. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Either way, as a whole, this is pretty underwhelming once again. But alright, that does it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of these albums, and or what you thought of my review. Or my reviews, I guess. Yeah, a bit of a disappointing episode. Well, I don't know. There were some good albums here, but just none that I consider great, personally. But I got a bunch more reviews coming up soon. I have been working on quite a bit for this YouTube channel, so yeah, I would expect hopefully quite a few uploads in June, but again, they're going to be very, very short form reviews, and they're probably going to be episodes like this where there's not as many albums per episode, although actually now that I'm saying that, I could be totally wrong. I think the next one is hopefully going to have around 10, so we'll see about that. Maybe I shouldn't say more uploads, but, well, there might be. I'm going to try. I'm going to really try. But I am quite busy with other stuff. I am going away pretty soon, too, for a little bit. Not for super long. I'll be back this month. But, yeah, without getting into all the details, I do have quite a bit of stuff going on in real life outside of this. So I just haven't had as much time to dedicate to this YouTube channel. But it is what it is. I still want to talk about these albums. They just might not be as in-depth as I would like, and I might not be reviewing as many albums as I would like. We'll see if that maybe changes a little bit as we get closer to the end of the summer. We'll see. But for now, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video if you want to. I'm rambling at this point, so I should probably just shut up. Thank you for watching. I will see you all later.